Will Bitcoin change the structure of government? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Before we do get into it, please make sure to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube. Really appreciate your support. I'm also going to put a QR code down below for a Bitcoin tip. So if you want to support the channel, feel free to leave me a little tip. Now let's get into it. So will Bitcoin change the structure of government? Yes, it definitely will. When we think about the power that money has over us and the influence that money has over us, it's very significant. We've all heard that saying, everything has its price, and I'm sure there's some things that you wouldn't accept any amount of money for, like losing a family member or for doing something that's against your beliefs. But for many things, if somebody offered you a high enough price, I'm sure there's a price where you would consider doing it. So money holds a lot of influence. One of my favorite things when thinking about the influence of money is thinking about Mr. Beast and his YouTube channel. He basically created this YouTube empire where he just offers people more and more money to do things. And it's just interesting to see the psychology of money and how people react to that incentive. So money has a ton of control over our lives. Really, money is just time and energy. It enables control over resources, labor, and markets. And I really think that if we are to see the monetary system change from this fiat monetary system to a Bitcoin standard, then we are really going to see the power dynamic of the world change. We're going to see a huge wealth transfer. The wealth is going to transfer from the people that don't have Bitcoin, from their hands, into the people that do have it. And really the entities, whether it be existing governments, large companies, or just individuals, these entities that have the Bitcoin are going to become more powerful and have more influence. We're already seeing the influence of Bitcoin at the government level. We saw this in the last election where we had one candidate who was very open to Bitcoin, very supportive of Bitcoin, speaking at the Bitcoin conference, making promises to the Bitcoin community, probably accepting Bitcoin donations for their campaign. And we saw the other candidate or the other party, we saw them kind of switch up candidates, but we didn't see them be very open to Bitcoin, right? They didn't really pay attention to the Bitcoin community, didn't really give them the time of day. And I really think that hurt them in this election, right? I think that this Bitcoin community and this Bitcoin network is growing, and it's going to have a huge influence on politics, right? Candidates who want to win are going to have to basically win these Bitcoin votes, and we're just seeing these Bitcoin voters grow. So Bitcoin is really starting to influence things at the government level. Historically, when the monetary system changes, we see that the power dynamic of the world changes. And the nations that adopt the better monetary system, or really the harder form of money, these nations prosper, right? They do good. And the nations that don't adopt it and stick with the inferior form of money, these nations suffer. A great example of this is looking at nations that adopted a gold standard versus a silver standard back in the day. If we look at the United Kingdom adopted a gold standard in 1821, and this did great things for them because at the time, gold was the hardest form of money. And really before Bitcoin, gold has been the hardest form of money throughout history. So those who have held on to gold have done pretty well. It's been a good way to store your value because the supply is growing at such a slow rate compared to the circulating supply, the existing supply. So because the United Kingdom adopted a gold standard, they saw the pound become the world reserve currency. They saw London become a center for international finance. And really this encouraged foreign investment in the United Kingdom because they prospered, they got wealthier, and nations wanted to trade with them because they wanted their gold. If we look on the flip side, China was on a silver standard up until the early 20th century, and because silver is inferior money to gold, they suffered, right? Those nations that adopted a gold standard became wealthier, and nations that held on to silver and were on a silver standard, they became poorer because gold is just harder money. Silver is easier to produce. So we saw gold appreciate against silver. Because gold was appreciating against silver, that led to more demand for gold. And really, gold's just harder to produce. So We saw China suffer because of this. We saw more foreign investment in countries that were on a gold standard like the USA, the United Kingdom, and Japan. And really, we saw less foreign investment in China because of this decision. So this just shows that there are major consequences for choosing the inferior money. You really want to choose the money that is scarcest, right? The hardest form of money. And today, I believe that is Bitcoin. So although gold has been the hardest form of money throughout history, I think that we are going to see people moving out of gold and really out of government money like the dollar and into Bitcoin, the hardest form of money. Now, if the fiat system is dying, is it a guarantee that we're going to have this new monetary system based around Bitcoin? I don't think it's a 100% guarantee, but I think it's very likely. We now live in this internet world, and when we look at what's happening with Bitcoin, it has become very large. It's above a $2 trillion market cap. It has stayed decentralized and secure. And I think that if we are in an internet world, we are going to have an internet money. And when we think about money, it's really just a way to communicate value, right? And I think that Bitcoin is going to be the tool to do that. I think that we're seeing a lot of great things being built on Bitcoin. I think there are some things that we still need to figure out, like how it's going to scale, how layers are going to be built on top of Bitcoin. But right now, I would say Bitcoin is the prime candidate to replace the existing monetary system and be a good base layer for a new one. Some people think that we're going back to a gold standard, but I think there's a reason that the gold standard failed before, and it's because this really just becomes a credit-based system. Because gold does not move very fast, right? It takes a lot of time and energy to move gold across the ocean or even across the country. You basically have to have this system where everybody just has a claim to gold, right? They're not really holding the physical gold, they're just owed gold. And I think that with this credit-based system, it just kind of falls apart, right? The big difference with Bitcoin is that Bitcoin can be sent across the world and it can settle in a couple of minutes. Gold can't do that, right? So it really just turns into this credit-based system, and I don't really think it's going to work in an internet world. And then some people think we're going to have something like a CBDC system where we have all these central bank digital currencies. I think this would be a horrible scenario because the government could just turn off your money with the push of a button. But I really don't think this is going to work because people are just going to be incentivized to opt into Bitcoin. If Bitcoin is holding its value the best, if people are able to access it, then I think that people will choose it, right? And I don't think there's really a lot that the government can do about it. And I think that's a great thing. I think it's going to give people a lot of freedom. I also just don't see us living in this world where we have all these different central bank digital currencies, right? Like if you were Russia or China, would you want to hold a CBDC from the United States where they can just turn off your money like that? I don't think so. So I don't really think the whole CBDC idea is going to work. Now, if we move to a monetary system based around Bitcoin, how is this going to change the power dynamic of the world? Well, for one, I think it's going to change the way we look at governments. Right now, I think we look at governments as these large and powerful enterprises that really have a little bit too much control. And a major reason that governments have too much control is because they're in control of the money, right? They're in control of the time and energy. And if governments ever want to have more control over their people, they can just create more money and devalue the savings of all the people that they govern. So if we do move to this decentralized money with a finite supply, I think it's going to mean that governments are going to be held accountable a little bit more. And it's really going to flip the script where governments aren't necessarily these large and over-controlling enterprises, but really these entities that are meant to serve the people. And one of the great things about Bitcoin, this chart I always see, maybe I'll put it here, is that individuals right now control most of the Bitcoin supply. We see that governments only control a small percentage of the total supply. Now that could definitely change because governments have a lot of money and resources, and if a country like the United States wanted to come in and buy up a lot of Bitcoin, they could do it pretty quickly, right? So I do think we'll see existing governments come in and buy up large portions of Bitcoin because they're going to have to, right? Bitcoin is now the hardest form of money, and countries and governments that don't buy into Bitcoin are going to suffer. We're seeing what Bitcoin adoption is doing for a country like El Salvador, who started stacking Bitcoin in 2021. And we've seen El Salvador become one of the better countries to live in as opposed to what they were a while ago, right? El Salvador used to be a very dangerous place. Now I'm seeing all these clips on like Instagram that El Salvador, they're building this new public marketplace. They built this great new public library, and we're seeing them become more wealthy, all because they've adopted the harder form of money. I think we'll see the United States start to stack more Bitcoin at some point here. We've seen that this new administration has been very pro-Bitcoin, which is great. And I think that more countries are going to be forced to hop in. I don't necessarily think that if we move towards this Bitcoin monetary system, it's going to mean that our existing form of government is going to be replaced. But I do think we are going to need to see our existing form of government evolve and become more compatible with this internet world we're moving into. When I look at the existing form of governance that we have here in the United States, it just seems a bit outdated, and I think that we're going to need more focus on internet related policies, and we're going to need more people that are familiar with tech and the internet and this world we're moving into. And if we do move towards this Bitcoin system, it does mean that the people in power are going to change, right? We're going to see the people who hold the Bitcoin, the money, they're going to have more influence and control, and we're going to see them influence policies that we have here in the United States. And a company like Strategy, who holds almost more Bitcoin than any other entity, we'll see them become very powerful, right? They could definitely have a lot of influence on our form of governance. Now, one thing I've thought about is that maybe we could see the world move towards a more digital form of governance or a decentralized form of governance. And it's a little bit difficult to picture exactly what this would look like because throughout history, government has been based on geographic location, right? You establish your government to protect your community or to build your roads or to establish an education program or healthcare. But as we move into this digital world where we have digital money, digital relationships, digital businesses, it makes sense that maybe we could have a digital decentralized form of governance that's not really bound by borders. And again, I'm not exactly sure what this would look like, but maybe you could have a form of governance that goes across borders, right? Across the globe. And you could have this network effect where you could have people that are under this form of governance from all these different places, right? And you could have representatives in these different places, and there's all these benefits with being a part of that form of governance. So it's kind of a foreign idea, but who knows? Maybe it's something we could see. We could see something like digital IDs or digital citizenship. And I do think that governance will always have something to do with geographic location because you need things like physical protection and physical health care, and you need to care about the things in your local community. But I do think that we could also have a more digital form of governance where it gives you benefits in this internet world. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is the idea that we can move towards a smaller form of governance. Now, while the United States has its benefits, I think the main benefit is that we get the protection from the United States, right? We feel comfortable here because we have the strongest military in the world. I do see some flaws with this large government system. One of the things that I don't like is when you pay taxes, right? Most of your taxes go to the federal government. So the money leaves your local community and goes to these national interests. And while some of these national interests, I'm sure, benefit people, I'm sure that a lot of them don't, and I'm sure that a lot of this money is misallocated. I do think that when the money and resources stay within the local community, it can provide a lot of benefit. Just think about all that money that you send to the federal government, think about if you put that money into local businesses or education in your local community or local infrastructure. Things could be a lot better off. So maybe if we do move into this Bitcoin monetary system where governments aren't as powerful and where the people have more control and governments more work for the people and not the other way around, maybe we could see the size of government shrink and we could see people more focused on their local community, establishing principles and ideas that benefit their local community, that everyone in their local community agrees with. I do think there are some trade-offs with a smaller form of governance. The main trade-off I see is that you don't get that protection that you get with a larger government like the United States. But I also think there would be some big benefits, and I think that maybe the local communities could be better off if they weren't sending all their money somewhere else. But we will just have to see if that happens, and we will see if Bitcoin does become this new monetary system. That's going to wrap it up for this one. If you didn't like and subscribe, please make sure to do that now. Thanks for watching. I'll be back soon.